Welcome, hoş geldiniz. A quick note for Turkish speaker first. Herkese merhaba. Yayınımız iki kanaldan Türkçe ve İngilizce olarak gerçekleştirilecek. Türkçe yayının bağlantısını videonun tanımında veya chat kutusunda bulabilirsiniz. I'm switching back to English. Dear all, thank you for joining us this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Sorry for the delay. That was on my side. All internet crashed and all the devices crashed, so we have a slight delay. My name is Basbugu. I'm an arts manager at the British Council, and I've been leading the Museum Without Walls projects for the last 5 years. Today, I'm joining the conversation from my home in Istanbul. I'm sitting in front of a white wall with a couple of shelves. I have short dark hair. I'm in my late 30s. I'm wearing dark shirt and yellow glasses. I want first go through the event setup, then we'll move on with the event. The main language of today would be English, and we have a live stream translated into Turkish on the British Council Turkey YouTube channel. We are using a Zoom-like setup with a blue background describing the exhibition design. It's parallel to our new exhibition design. The video screen's number and sizes will change throughout the event according to the speakers talking. We will show images and videos, but the moderators will be describing them before showing them. Currently on screen with me, I have BSL and Turkish Sign Language translation interpreters. BSL is on the top left, bottom left, and Turkish Sign Language is on bottom right corners. Thank you, Rabira and Ayça, for joining us. today. And for those who want to follow the event with live captioning, we have English and Turkish live captioning. Again, the links are below in the video description and in the chat boxes. We'll have a Q&A session at towards the end of the event. Hopefully we'll have time. If you have questions, you can post them throughout the stream to the live chat box or to the comment section. We will try to cover as much as possible at the end of the event. So now let's talk about the event itself. Today we're gathered here to launch the 5th exhibition of Museum Without Walls, and also to share the British Council new arts strategy. The British Council is the United Kingdom's international organization for cultural relations and educational opportunities. We've been working in Turkey for the last 81 years, since 1940. So we've been there for quite a long, and every year we've been connected with thousands of students, educators, policymakers, academics, creatives, and entrepreneurs in Turkey. And for those who don't know about Museum Without Walls, I just briefly want to introduce it as well. It's an online exhibition platform that developed by the British Council in Turkey. The first exhibition went online in 2017. Our aim was to showcase visual arts, mainly works from the British Council collection, and to develop a platform that would be accessible by anyone, anywhere. And this digital journey we embarked on 6 years ago now has turned into a necessity today, and we're quite happy that this experience has helped us deal and process this all new adaptation coming with the pandemic as well. And we'll be talking around how we adapted ourselves to the digital throughout the event. The process was quite straightforward in Museum Without Walls. We selected curators from Turkey via open call, and they had the opportunity to spend time at the British Council collection building with more that has and the collection has more than 9,000 works. And each year the curators were asked to respond to a theme. They had the opportunity to travel to the UK, to spend time in other countries as well, last year in Ukraine, for example, and in Istanbul as well, and meet arts professionals from all around the world and new artists. Up until today, including this exhibition, we hosted 8 curators, all women, and almost 100 artists on the platform. But this project isn't only about creating new artistic collaboration. It has and it was, and it's also about creating a digital offer for people around the world, for people who don't have access to the arts because of social, physical, economical restraints, creating a language that wouldn't alienate the visitor, but that would engage them, entice them to visit other exhibitions, research British arts, spend time with the arts. And I think that's quite precious. And on the other hand, Museum Without Walls is also a research and development project in terms of digital accessibility. Over the years, thanks to our accessibility partners from the UK and Turkey, we managed to incorporate accessibility tools such as visual description of all the artworks, sign language interpretation of all the text. For example, last year we had 5 language interpretations in 5 different languages. So we are really much invested in making this offer accessible by anyone. And we managed to reach almost 1 million unique visitors over these 5 years, over these 5 exhibitions. And our success was also recognized by prestigious awards such as the Webbies and the Golden Spider Awards in Turkey. But for me as project manager, one of the most important impact or recognition was to see last year in our exhibition that 5% of the visitor stated that that was their first time visiting an arts exhibition. And I think that that means a lot in terms of diversifying the audience. So Museum Without Walls is not only about artistic and innovative, it not only has artistic and innovative value, but it also has, I think, a strong impact on diversifying the arts audience. And today we're launching our 5th exhibition, Does It Feel Cozy? Co-curated by Rita Aktay and Ritika Biswas. We'll dive in more detail about the exhibition in the second section, but first I want to invite Skinder Hundal, Director Arts at the British Council, to share and discuss the British Council new art strategy. Thank you, Skinder, for joining us. I'll briefly introduce you. I'll read out not to miss anything. Skinder has joined the British Council during the pandemic, so it was in a pretty challenging time. And previously, he worked as CEO, Director of New Arts Exchange, a contemporary art space in Nottingham, where over the past 12 years, he worked to create connections between the UK and overseas through arts and cultural projects. He has been working across art forms. His international experience includes projects such as La Biennale di Venezia, TED Global, Google Cultural Institute, and the UK's official arts programme for the First World War centenary 1418 Now. This is a very, very brief introduction to a fantastic resume. Thank you, Skinder, for joining us. Could I first ask you to describe yourself and your setting for users who can't see or have trouble seeing us?
So today, and thank you, Sue, for the introduction. And it's brilliant that we're launching Museum Without Walls today. So I'm wearing a black shirt, blue blazer with a blue tiki bow, with a salt and pepper beard, bald head. That's me.
Thank you. And you've been with the British Council for more than 100 days now, 108, I guess, as of yesterday. It was a pleasure following up your Twitter feed with daily content about your discoveries, encounters, and impression as British Council Director Arts. For those interested in this feed, we'll also drop a link in the live chat. I've noticed that there was a focus on digital showcasing, digital opportunities for artists and institutions in the UK and overseas, and even Museum Without Walls appearing a couple of times. So where do you think digital projects such as Museum Without Walls, which are committed to showcasing the arts with collaboration, innovation, and accessibility at their core, stand within the new global British Council art strategy?
Yes, good question, Sue. So firstly, I'm a big fan of Museums Without Walls because it activates and animates using digital platforms a collection that is actually quite physical. But if you don't get to see it physically, how then do you engage with it? So Museums Without Walls is a huge asset as a program in determining that. I have to think about digital. I often think, is it the bridge between the real and the surreal? Don't know, or is it the space between this idea of dream and non-fictional reality? And can it be the lightning switch of exchange between then what is physical, metaphysical, inclusive perhaps of both mind and what is sometimes known as the mystical presence, i.e., the kind of spiritual dimension imagined? So therefore, I think digital can unlock a new reality and a way of seeing, and it is a language beyond the programming of sophisticated algorithms if we design it appropriately with the right kind of platforms. And I think after reading the wonderful book Clara and the Sun by the great British Japanese author Kazuo Ishiguro, I actually realized that the digitalization of our normal everyday life is already here, but there is much we can do to improve how the technology captures the kind of intuitive essence of our existence and experience and understanding of this kind of infinite world, multiverse. That's what the digital can bring. And at British Council in 2020, like many of us, and 2021 now, we're almost halfway through the year. We all had to change, and so Museums Without Walls, pre-pandemic, and now in its fifth iteration, was paving the way. It was already future focused. And this episode, curated by Rita and Ritika, who we'll hear from, with the digital expertise of Elliott, who is otherwise known in the team as the hard drive in the outer brain, which I love, have successfully determined this new reality, an application of how digital interfaces do not replicate the three-dimensional, but actually define their own unique fingerprint and therefore dimensional existence. I think this is really kind of unique, therefore, for what Museums Without Walls does. And I think this kind of hybrid existence with this kind of three-dimensional face-to-face interface, which comes together to create this kind of new dimension existence, will become the norm. And it hasn't quite determined itself the way it could do, but I really believe that this project is, defining that. So this kind of new habit of nature is being realized through these kind of creative episodes with artists, curators, and the audiences who seal the answers with the questions posed and sometimes the hidden questions. And we're in a new era, and we need to be an organization that is of our time and for our time. The future has always been now, and some say may already have happened. So it is certainly happening with this iteration, i.e. the future, and I'm really, really supportive of Museums Without Walls going forward. So that's my kind of short answer. I have a longer answer, but I really wanted just to share my sentiment, feeling, and emotion for this moment. And I'm a huge fan of the curators and the creative team, and Sue, for you to instigate such a project, which should be global and should be expanding, is truly a magnificent moment.
Thank you, Skinder, for the kind words. So we would expect a new iteration in the following years, maybe in the global scheme. But do you think that this kind of model could be also transferred to other art forms? Do you think that it would work and that would be something that we would pursue as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is a site-specific intervention that looks at a collection. That's the first starting point. But the principle of what it's trying to achieve is to engage audiences in a way that isn't the kind of binary expectation of what digital is. Digital is, in the end, it's defined as 0 and 1 in terms of how it's determined as a structure. But actually, there are millions of fractions in between that actually allow you to be creative within it. So, as an aesthetic, as an art form itself, is what is being realized here. So I think this iteration is not just a platform to engage what exists, it actually creates its own language. And I think that's what will be interesting in our broader strategy. Now, our broader strategy looks at three areas, and those are cultural exchange, which is about building art ecologies, so between organizations, arts professionals, artists, curators, etc. And it's about spotlighting and highlighting what really works. The second area is our whole area around creative economy. So this is a huge area, but it's really looking at enterprise, it's looking at policy, and most of all, it's looking at leadership. We're 21 years into a new century. It feels like the world's going to end, but I think there are new leaders out there, and this new generation of curators have inspired me. And I've heard from them earlier this week, and I've had a little test and play with the platform. It's really what we need right now: a new leadership, a new language, and some have said to me, maybe seismic change even. And why not? We do need seismic change. And the third area is about global challenges. How does art respond to global challenges? The three big challenges right now: climate crisis, inclusion and inequality, and our health within the framing of a new economy or a new way of being in which opportunities are shared, and that there is a reducing disparity between those who have and those who have not. So our strategy is trying to do that. And it's early days for me. Like I said, it's day 109. It's not day 365 where I've had a whole year. But I'm really enjoying myself here and meeting wonderful people like yourself, Sue, who are instigating things which have come about by your experience and your lived experience as much as your empathy quotient with the world we're in today. And I think that's the kind of work we're looking to generate going forward, is, activating the new emergence with the kind of intergenerational wisdom and knowledge of those that can, guide, support, but also be challenged together in order to create these new questions, new answers, new solutions, with an optimism, with an energy, with a chemistry. So, this project for me is a great example of that. And it's the principle of the project. The content will always change from music, dance, literature, theatre, architecture, design, fashion, visual cultures, etc. So all of that, will be site specific based on the kind of content drivers. And those content drivers are the new cultural leaders. And you've got two of them in the room, probably, we're going to hear from right now.
Yeah. So it's about redefining the sites each and every time and make them more inclusive, and also responding to the climate crisis as well. I mean, digital obviously feels greener than the physical space, but it has also its own flow. But it's also about finding ways to be more greener and to be more inclusive, and coming to that. How does the British Council Art Strategy also responds to the to disability arts? Why is it a priority? Because we are a proud partner of Unlimited. We try to make our events as accessible as possible. But would it be also at the top of the agenda for the next years?
I agree, and that's great observation, Sue. Has to be at the forefront of what we do. And you're right, digital isn't the solution to climate crisis. It's certainly helpful, but it also, like you say, has its own flaws in terms of data storage. Use of electricity. That's gone up because of the use of these phones. But we need to really kind of understand how we use that kind of digital space that really kind of activates this new imagination, this kind of the millions of fractions in between that bring that magic back to who we really are, human or non-human, within this kind of planet that is traveling around the sun at 18 miles per second. It's phenomenal when you think of that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just checking if we have any questions from the floor, but I guess not, at least not on my phone. I want to ask another question, but you also mentioned the cultural exchange strategy. Will we be seeing more offers to support collaboration between countries, between the UK and overseas, in the next years, coming from the British Council acting as a catalyzer between the UK and the overseas countries? Because with the pandemic and its economic effects, and mostly its effect on the art sector, both in the UK and everywhere else, the sector has suffered, and it badly needs support, in economical support, but also know-how support. We are here, we are in 110 countries, and as local teams, we are here to support, but we also need to be able to support those relations and exchange economically, because that's what would engender more creativity as well. Is there a plan for that in the strategy?
Yeah, there has to be a plan, otherwise what's the point of us, I guess. But I suppose what your question is the scale of investment. We've had a real disaster worldwide. And fortunately here we've had this idea of cultural protection investment that has really helped the art sector. Not everybody's benefited. So there's disparities between freelance and big organisations who have infrastructures, and artists themselves have suffered a lot, particularly in certain fields where their touring has just completely stopped, and that was their income model. So I think all of those critical things we can do to support are really important. And if you look at the immediate year ahead, we have to somehow align our strategies so that we're supporting the sector, building relations between countries so that we can create that exchange that matters for the future. Because what you do now is what happens in the future, in a sense. So this targeted investment with cultural professionals, new networks between countries remains a huge priority. And expanding our digital offer, using these new platforms and widening access to exciting and inspiring new work from the UK and also from other countries to kind of intersect with solidarity, with a new design principle about the context and the world we're in. Because it's the context, the gravitational constant has shifted completely. And that means the forces of attraction between one another have to be realigned. That means investment. The issue is we've all suffered a huge hit. British Council's operating model is one where it earns money as well through its English exams and English lessons. That's been a huge hit in terms of a bleed for the organisation. We're having to repair and respond to that as well. So it's not just the art, it's also a whole educational strand of work we do. And that intersectionality between those areas between British Council are going to be important. And the expertise within the wider world, the emergence of new leaders, the emergence of new models of delivery and exchange, they all have to be explored now. Some people say do what is urgent, but also I would say do what is important or importantly urgent. And what's importantly urgent is that artists, creative professionals bring narratives to this world that give a sense of a new reality, a new understanding. So the investment between one country and another is really important, and that multiple mutuality between countries, between cities, beyond the countries, within the countries, and the unseen, i.e., the kind of rural villages which have a lot of talent. So that is really important to also, to connect with. Of course, we need to triple our budgets and we need to find new ways of finding money. And we want, money to arise not only from, the grant and aid we get from the FCDO, which is the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, but we also want, to come from new philanthropists who have an interest in, bringing positive change to the world. So we've got to find those people who will join with us and partner with us, because given the resource, I think artists can bring great solution to some of the kind of planetary issues right now. And artists don't work in isolation. We've got to work with scientists, technologists, educationalists, health professionals, environmentalists. This is not a singular echo chamber, and we've got to redesign the algorithm so that we bring a bit of kind of humanity with, and I will borrow a phrase from Ritika, the curator, the non-human context as well, because this is not just our planet. This planet also belongs to nature. It belongs to another range of millions of species. I think it's 9 million species, 2 million discovered. That's what I learned the other day. So anyway, there is a great appetite to find solution and create exchange and to create collaboration. And that collaboration needs to be site specific, autonomous, and targeted according to the situation scenario that locations face. But all I know is that there is in this country, in the UK, and all the professionals I've met in all the wider 110 countries so far, some really, really talented emergence. And we must protect and support that pipeline to design the future with intergenerational dialogues. And most of all, action.
Thank you. And we have a question from the floor that maybe it's also a follow-up from this about the action point at least. How will the British Council attract in your plans, Skinder, disabled curators? So it's a specific one, but it's also about
Yes,
the
very
action
specific.
that we should take.
You know, this whole thing about equality, inclusion has to be at the heart. It cannot be an addendum. It cannot, it, although we have separate strategies for this at British Council, it still needs to be at the centre. The separate strategy is really about defining how it sits in the centre. The issue around equality, disability in particular, is a huge matter of concern, not just in the UK, but worldwide. And we do have programs for this area of work, um, but there's definitely there's huge room to expand how we work with curators who specialise in this area. Um, because how one sees disability in the UK may not be how disability is experienced
Yes.
somewhere else in the world. There is a kind of exchange and learning to be had, and there are certain places in the world, and curators bring this to us often, a knowledge base and research base that can be put into action to create, more kind of high impact environments and events and initiatives, which are not just short bursts but are long term. So it's certainly something that is at the forefront. So anything that's planned at British Council has to do this, what we call an EDI scan. So the equality, diversity and inclusion scan. So we must scan, are we being inclusive? How are we being inclusive? Is there a good mix and representation of cultures, classes, people who are able, disabled, etc., from different, gender perspectives? This is really important in the mix that we have and how we design. And we should analyze it using mathematics as well. We should look at how much we're investing in X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z. But I welcome the question from the floor, and just to say that it's a priority.
Thank you, Skinder. I think we are out of time. We reach our 15 minutes with you. Thank you for being with us today. And I just want to
Appreciate it.
remind everybody that the British Council is very active on social media. So for any future projects,
I think we've lost Sue, and if I'm still live, the social media is active, and you can go to a range of different websites. Turkey itself has its own website, and you can pull out the social media there. It has its own Instagram, British Arts, and so on that British.
yeah,
I just jumped in, Sue. I don't know.
yeah.
I was just
Yeah,
explaining
go ahead,
after you.
please.
Well, no, I was just
No,
saying that Turkey has its own British Council site. It has its own social media on Twitter and Instagram, and also in the UK we have British Arts UK, kind of British Arts, I think it's called, on Instagram, but also on Twitter. And there's a lot of information there, but there's all sorts of other sites. It can be quite confusing,
yeah.
and especially for somebody like me who just worked on 3 sites in the past and 3 of my own sites. So when you've got like 100 sites, it does get a bit confusing. But I think there's plenty there. That's what to say.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time and covering for when I was off, and hope to have other opportunities for more conversation with you as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sue, and thank you, everybody, and
Thank you, Skin.
congratulations.
Thank you. Before inviting our next guest, I want to talk briefly about this year Museum Without Walls iteration. Usually, the project team will meet 2 times at least face to face. One in the UK in London. We would spend time at the collection building, going through the works, making our decisions, curators, really touching the works and spending time there, and also meeting, arts professionals, other curators in the UK, in London and other cities. And a second meeting would occur in Istanbul here, where we would have a face-to-face launch, celebrate this new exhibition all together. But yeah, this year, because of all the circumstances, we had to do a 100% digital run, and it wasn't easy, but it was as pleasant as the other iterations. We had several open calls to build up the project team, for artistic advisor, accessibility consultant, for our sign language interpreters, for evaluators, and most importantly, for our curators. We ran 2 open calls, one in Turkey, one in the UK for curators, and Rita Aktay was selected to represent Turkey, and Ritika Biswas was selected to represent the UK. From I might say, from a very wonderful pool of applicants. It was not an easy decision. And today, after almost 7 months of hard work and countless hours of online meetings, we are now launching Does It Feel Cozy? We want to show you a short video sneak peek to the exhibition prepared by our design agency that also implemented the website, Igoi Malatane. The video have a moving background with bright colors. We see the exhibition titles, the curators' names, and the artist names. We have 27 artists on board. I won't be able to read them all out to you, but we also we will post the artist names in the chat box, and you'll see 6 emojis that are a part of our exhibition and a part of your exhibition as well. An alarm, dinosaur, old woman, basket, milk bottle, and confetti. But our curators will go through that in more detail soon. So if we could see the video now, it's a 1-minute video. Welcome, Elliott.
Hey there.
Elliott Burns is our artistic advisor for the project. Let me just briefly introduce him. He's an exhibition curator, co-founder of the online gallery Offsite project, and associate lecturer at the University of the Arts London. Specializing in digital art ecologies, social media, and post-Anthropocene museology, he has worked on several international projects. Elliott is our artistic advisor, and his background and experience have helped us revise our approach to the digital this year, and was crucial in the delivery of this fantastic exhibition. Dear Elliott, thank you for your hard work on this and your commitment to Museum Without Walls. Can I ask you to briefly describe yourself and your settings before leaving the floor to you to invite Rita and Ritika?
Of course. So I'm a white male. I have short to medium brown hair. My beard is at its sort of fullest length at the moment and going a little bit copper or ginger, and I'm wearing a red shirt. Behind me is a old and slightly crumbling brick wall. I think that wraps up my description of myself, hopefully.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm leaving the floor to you.
Thank you. Okay, so for the
Sorry,
next section, we're going to be...
sorry, I forgot to say something. I will be gathering the questions from the floor and come back and join you after your session to ask them.
Thanks, Lou.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the next section, we're going to be doing a Q&A with the two curators, Rita and Ritika. Throughout the process, there will be some slides on screen which I will give descriptions for. We have 4 questions in total, but before we begin, I would just like to invite Rita and Ritika to briefly describe themselves and the setting that they're in. Ritika, would you go first?
Sure. Hi, I'm in India, in Calcutta right now, hence the dark cave behind me at the very moment. But I'm a woman in her mid-20s. I have blonde, curly black hair and brown skin.
And Rita?
Hi, I am sitting in my room in London at the moment. I'm a young woman in my mid-20s with long, big hair, and I'm wearing a cream t-shirt, and I have a white background behind me.
Thank you both. Okay, so we'll go through the 4 questions. As I said, I'll read out a little description of the slides that we're presenting and then jump into the question for you two to take over. So on screen, we have an image of the exhibition. This is one of the opening scenes where the visitor is guided through an exchange, a text-based exchange that is modeled after comms chats that you may be familiar with, things like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp. There is a multicolor and transitioning fluid background, and along the bottom of the screen you would see the 5 emojis, the milk bottle, the dinosaur, the alarm, confetti ball and grandma, and just up from that, one of those emojis has been selected, the washing basket. This first question is around creating journeys. So I'd like to begin by asking about the concept and structures that are rooted in the exhibition and how this informed the creation of multiple journeys.
Yeah, so the theme that we were responding to, given by the British Council for the open call, was that of women and solidarity. And once we were selected, Rita and I kind of came to the floor with our own concepts and our own proposals, and just started to kind of like have very long conversations about the points of convergence between our own proposals and ideas for the project. And eventually we kind of expanded our notion of women and solidarity across 3 main sites and scales. The sites firstly being that of the body, the second being that of domestic space, and the third one being of the planet, so planetary scale. And to kind of come back to each one of those really briefly, we were kind of thinking about what it means to inhabit a body coded as female or female identifying across various spaces, especially for women from the global south, women of color, of queer women. And when we're thinking of domestic space, we were thinking kind of gendered labor, essentially, reproductive, affective, emotional labor. And thinking of the planetary, something that ran across both our proposals was that of bioecological collapse. And yeah, so we started to parse the interconnections between, among these really, that of common underlying emotional threads, especially of anxiety and grief and joy, and the ways in which labor kind of flows through all 3 of these sites. And then we started to think a bit more deeply about interspecies and cross-species care and survival and all of these threads that underlie the human and the non-human. And eventually something else that we kind of added in, which was always a tone that was always the periphery of what we were thinking and talking about, was that of the dreamlike, the uncanny, sort of like understanding what this liminal space is that holds all these ambivalences and seeming paradoxes, but really is one that we're quite familiar with, even if it is an uncanny space for people to be in. And so you see how this plays out in our design aspects for the exhibition as well.
And to come in a bit on these design aspects that were a crucial part of our curatorial concept as well, because the exhibition design and the experience of it interweaves quite closely with the concepts we've been thinking around. We wanted to come up with a specific navigational and interpretive system with which to navigate the exhibition, and we wanted to do so by using emojis in a tag and filter capacity. So to explain that very simply, each work in the exhibition is tagged with 3 emojis. And before you enter the exhibition, you're given the chance to select which emojis you'd like to view. And you're taken on a journey to view all works tagged with the emojis you've selected. And at the end, you can go back and repeat. So this gives us at once a navigational, but also most importantly, an interpretive mechanism with which to access the meanings, the multiple meanings behind each work. And this differs quite radically than the way exhibitions could be organized in museum spaces, in physical space, because when we put works in different rooms in physical space, we can allocate each work only to one room. However, actually all the topics and scales and struggles and concerns that we're trying to interweave between the works repeat themselves. So with the tag and filter system, we can actually support interconnections between the works rather than mutually exclusive categories. And just to quickly explain the thinking behind our 6 different emojis very briefly, we have a milk bottle emoji. For us, this meant survival and care and nurture. We have a dinosaur emoji, which for us meant extinction and the non-human and the uncanny, but also in a childish, playful way. The laundry basket meant domestic space and especially forms of gendered labor within domestic space. The grandma was for intergenerational togetherness. The alarm, the siren, was for crisis across many scales, be it personal, political, or ecological. And the confetti, most importantly, was for joy, even within difficult circumstances, which we found to be a crucial part of the exhibition.
Thank you both. So we'll go on to the next question in the next slide then. So this question is regarding collaborating online, and what we have on screen is a snapshot of one of the online tools we used for planning, developing, and curating the exhibition. It's a tool called Miro, and it's effectively a interactive whiteboard where you can write notes, add images, leave comments, and post-it notes. And you may be able to see that there is a set of concentric circles in which Rita and Ritika were arranging and categorizing a set of artworks that they were picking and selecting for the exhibition. The question is that differing from previous iterations of Museum Without Walls, this was the first time the program has been run entirely online, meaning despite working closely together for 4 months, you've not yet had the chance to meet in person. Do you have any particular personal or pragmatic reflections on working online?
Thank you, Elliott. So this was actually quite an interesting working process, precisely for the reasons Elliott mentioned. Throughout the months we've been working on the project, both Ritika and myself kept moving. I moved from Istanbul to the UK, Ritika moved from Calcutta to the UK and back. So we've been conversing across these distant geographies. And from the very beginning, ideas of home were quite central to our personal conversations. And the exhibition concept fed on these very personal reflections on shared experiences and concerns. Also, the exhibition texts, we co-wrote them, and this collaboration was key. We would often spend day-long sessions editing these texts, and the editorial process itself became a way to dig deeper into the works. And most importantly, collaborative tools like the Miro board Elliott just put up on the screen allowed us to really explore and experiment with the design of the exhibition and with the framework of the curatorial concept. We could keep moving around and changing things, diagramming things with the whole team at times with the accessibility editors, at times with the digital agency, and we could really ensure that this was a mobile and collaborative process from the very beginning.
Yeah, and just to add on really quick, I think there is a different form of intimacy to this sort of digital intimacy that we all kind of find ourselves embedded within now. And I think this was a particular sort of version of that where we kind of had to trust each other quite explicitly for this project to work at all, and co-working across digital space and knowledge. Forms of knowledge that are experienced, that are learned, to kind of like trust one another from where we're coming, because it's hard to collaborate otherwise when you can't read someone's body language and kind of be in the same space as them, right? Yeah, and I think there were some intangible resonances about our purposes within this art ecology and what we kind of want to do with this exhibition, and kind of being on similar planes, and planes of knowledge, but also about intention. I think with this exhibition was really crucial. And sometimes, honestly, the lack of physical proximity almost didn't seem to matter, especially when you're kind of embedded with somebody within this like 9-hour Zoom session, co-writing all of the text, right? Like it feels as though they're there with you, in some sense. But yeah, I mean, it was challenging, but yeah, very, very intriguing as well.
Thank you both. So we'll move on to the third question, which is in regards to accessibility. So on screen, we have a section of the exhibition, a work from the collection, but in particular, we are looking at the text display on the right-hand side, where the font size has been increased. And just below that, we have a woman framed by a black background who is doing sign language translation of the text. So the question is, accessibility is a key aspect of the Museum Without Walls programme, each year unearthing lessons that are factored into the next. What were the key lessons you extracted from the process, and how do you feel these will be taken forward in your curatorial practices?
Yeah, I mean, this was my first time, I think, working with an exhibition that from the very get-go, we were kind of working with understanding how to write text or curate an exhibition where they'll be translated into British Sign Language, Turkish Sign Language, audio description, so on and so forth. So it was very expansive from the very beginning, and kind of kind of intricately present in everything that we were doing and every step that we were moving forward in with this digital exhibition. I think also thinking of non-art accessibility and accessibility for like non-art audiences, something that I really will take with me and had to learn along the way were kind of writing curatorial texts that were not embedded in the jargon that emerges from typically art and academic circles. So we were very clear that we wanted to write short texts, very clear, very lucid texts, not more than 100 to 150 words that were easy to understand, easy to read. This wasn't necessarily to pander to a wider audience, but to rethink and recalibrate what is crucial information that we had to give about each artwork and the context, the historical, political, emotional, the bio context of each artist and the spaces within which they were creating these works. So yeah, I think that is something I'll definitely take with me here on.
I agree with Ritika that the biggest part of accessibility with regards to this project for me personally was keeping in mind that 5% of past Museum Without Walls audiences were non-art audiences, were first-time exhibition goers, and trying to make these artworks, some of them coming from a prestigious collection such as the British Council collection, some of them coming from practicing contemporary artists who work in very experimental ways. Trying to make all of this relatable and accessible in a meaningful way to non-art audiences was a key priority. So partially our use of emojis as a fun and interpretive tool to engage with the exhibition was serving this end. We wanted the overall exhibition to have a fun and colorful feeling, and realize that fun and enjoyment could be a tool of accessibility for a non-art audience. We also wanted to keep in mind how how we could curate with care, in a way that how we could care for the experience of the audience when they come to this exhibition, and in giving them the agency to pick one or two emojis and go on different journeys, which would vary in content, was a gesture of care. Because if you choose one emoji, you will see less works than you will if you choose two. So we wanted to really keep in mind not to overwhelm an audience and let them engage with the works in their own rhythm and in their own capacity, to narrow and minimize the contextual information we're giving, have it strong, have it supporting the works, and then let the works really speak for themselves. And the works we chose, on the contrary to all of this, were very loud and vibrant and colorful. So we were trying to keep that balance.
Okay, so we'll now go to our final question, which is to do with the selection of artists. So we are seeing a slide also from the exhibition with a work present by one of the non-collection artists. The work is showing a piece by Elif. This is a surreal scene with two figures set against a seascape standing on the rocks. They're in elaborate and theatrical dress. You'll also have on the right-hand side the name of the artist, the name of the artwork, additional details, and the 3 emojis that relate to this piece. So, the final question. I'd like to end by asking you about your impression of the British Council collection and what it meant to select external artists to be exhibited alongside these.
It's a very unique context to be able to work with, to have a large collection available to you, with works that reach historically quite far back, and to be able to pair these with globally practicing young artists' work is a very unique context, and it breeds some very interesting conversations. To be able to bring together, for example, a work by Shirley Baker, which photographs Manchester's slum clearance in the 1960s, with a work by Charlotte Schmitz, who photographed in the 2010s Istanbul's Balat neighborhood. These works come from very different time frames and geographically different points, but they also speak to a lot of the same concerns and embody a lot of the same topics. So to be able to bring these seemingly disparate yet very connected works together under one roof of the same exhibition, and to allow these conversations to happen, is very crucial in exploring and understanding artistic practices, and in opening them up to larger audiences.
Yeah. And when we were thinking about the emojis, kind of going back to them really briefly, they also in some ways ground perhaps our concerns and our strategies kind of going forward with this British Council and sort of contemporary practicing artists right now across the world, in that we're kind of creating ecologies which are generational as well. So when you think of the grand man, you think of inheritance and you think of ancestry and what does it mean to inherit a creative or an arts practice. That's something that we want to extend out within the actual curation of the works and the artists themselves, and opening up and expanding the British Council collection in ways that are hopefully generative, right? And we also kind of wanted to bring together very, very different, not just forms and tones, but practices and political, socio-political contexts of art, to bring together overtly political feminist art, which you can see in the See Red Women's Workshop and the posters, which are present in the exhibition, to very formally investigative work, such as Rohini Devasher's video feedback work on algae, which again, going back to the emojis, sort of connotes the non-human and the uncanny, and so on, to creative feminist ecologies, such as those created by Sibel Horada with the choral installation, which is an experimental installation, right? And how can we kind of bring all of these different planes of practice and thought and emotion together in some ways, and hold those together within the exhibition without making it reductive, and instead kind of creating these generative networks which are transboundaried and both geopolitically and cross-species and interspecies, to kind of push the idea of anthropocentrism, as well as the idea of this core margin sort of binary, which exists very much within the art world, and expand that out. So yeah.
Thank you so much both for your answers. That's really fantastic. I believe we might have some questions from the audience as well.
Yes. Thank you so much for this great conversation. And I know it wasn't easy to resume this experience and the exhibition itself in such a short time, but hopefully we'll have other opportunities to engage with the audience, talk about the exhibition, talk about the artworks along the way. There's a question from the floor, and I guess we only have time for one. Did the pandemic and the obligation to shift to the digital for showcasing have changed or affected your curation process for Museum Without Walls? So, yeah.
So
It's a hard one.
to me, it was quite significant that the Museum Without Walls project had already been running for 5 years. So definitely prior to the pandemic, and especially Sue had been leading the project with a focus on accessibility. So this digital exhibition in the history of the project wasn't put online as a must. But it was put online with the intention of reaching larger audiences, those who don't live in big cities with lots of art museums, perhaps. And you could enumerate other sorts of boundaries to exhibition going. So the digital presence of this exhibition was to reach broader audiences, and that's something we really embodied throughout the process in our selection of works, in our contextual material and writing texts, and we were also very aware not to replicate certain common digital experiences that have been present since the beginning of the pandemic. We did not want to overwhelm, and we wanted to have a pleasurable, simple enough experience where the artworks could just speak for themselves, and where the viewer could be left to contemplate the artwork in a simple setting. Therefore, the colorfulness of the background in the exhibition, when you see it, the neon and the shifting colors, are a way to create a nice design. However, the actual experience of going through the works in a slideshow and reading very short texts and trying to just engage with the visuals is quite simplistic. And this was a way to try and differentiate this exhibition from the many virtual reality and overly designed, difficult perhaps at times to navigate, maybe less accessible to non-art audiences, sorts of websites that we've been encountering increasingly.
Yeah, that was very, very important. I think certain things obviously emerged as even more important as the pandemic kept unfolding across the project itself, in terms of the kind of pervasive grief and trauma and alienation that people were feeling, of course, especially with having to work from home, and more traumatic spaces and experiences that people were kind of going through. So it became crucial for us, I think, to hold on to that crux of whimsy and joy and the dreamlike, not in order to necessarily escape or evade the realities of what's going on around us, but how do we kind of hold all of that in conjunction with something like joy, and how do we create a space within this exhibition for people to perhaps navigate that in a whimsical, almost like childlike manner, while still raising important, provocative, and pertinent questions about the spaces that we find ourselves in.
Thank you. We have a last one. We touched upon it a little in your questions, but do you have a particular episode within the project that made you learn something new, and what was it you learned? wants to start? Elliott, maybe you. Should I put you on the spot? Because you were a
Sure.
crucial part of the project as well.
I come from a curatorial background that I work primarily with digital exhibition design, and a little bit building on what Rita was saying in her previous answer. A lot of the fine art field never has accessibility at the forefront, and that's been especially the case during the pandemic. There has been an explosion of online design because museums and art galleries have been forced to move their practices into the digital. And so they've rushed and created interfaces and experiences which are overstimulated and not often designed for a broader audience outside of people who are very primed for those visual experiences. So for me, the thing that is always going to stick with me is the time to slow down that this project offered, and the opportunity to, in long and really enjoyable sessions between the four of us, to work things out, to fine tune, to trim back, to think about user interface design, and really key down to what are the essentials that are required. And we thought a lot about how an app is built. So if we think back to the early days of Instagram, it was far less complicated than it is now. And that is because you have to start with a level of clarity and then build up a behavioral awareness. And in this project, I think there have been an incredible set of correct choices to make that experience pure and exactly what is needed, rather than overcomplicate, overstimulate, confuse matters. And that's down to some brilliant decision making and some real wonderful conversations that's happened between everyone here.
Thank you.
I will definitely have to agree with Elliott that collaboration was key in this entire process. And if there's anything I've learned, it's been through the experience of collaborative thinking and making and problem solving. From the very beginning, coming to the table with two quite distinct curatorial proposals, and then just taking them apart, merging them, rebuilding them, and especially learning from Ritika, for me personally, to be open in the thinking and not trying to finalize or pin things down too easily, but letting the thoughts emerge, letting the crazy ideas just be explored. In fact, the emoji was a sort of crazy idea that was a bit of a funny thought in the beginning, but then exploring it and allowing these moments to happen, having meetings with Elliott and Sue where we really think hard about what is possible and really give ourselves that space. Especially, I would also want to emphasize that this is made possible by a budget and a time and space to do so, which is why such opportunities are very important in today's art ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I just keep going back to that emoji moment, that conversation, right? Because Rita kind of proposed it, and we were thinking about everything from like Deliveroo to like Google Maps, and all of these apps and things that we use on a daily basis, but we don't think about in sort of artistic higher art spaces, right? Or within these realms. And for me, I kind of had to contend a little bit with a moment of resistance for myself, where it was like, do we really want to enmesh those technologies and behaviors into something like an art exhibition? And then we just kind of like sat with it, we let it marinate for a bit, and then we ran with it. And that was a real moment of learning for me, to understand that we can in fact enmesh these different behaviors and realms of our brain and our own expected, I guess, behaviors within these insulated spaces, and how to make those porous and permeable. Why is ordering food off of Deliveroo different than trying to navigate an art exhibition, in terms of the behaviors that it presupposes or assumes, right? So definitely very glad to Rita for introducing that, and for Sue and Elliott taking some of our craziness quite literally, and really making them manifest, I think, in this exhibition. That was cool.
Super. Thank you for making this ride quite pleasurable. And we're now run out of time. And thank you all for joining. Thank you, our sign language interpreters and our captioners as well, and our assistant Zeynep and Mert from Jota Live to make this event happen. And most of all, thank you, speakers today, and our audience. And also, I want to thank everybody that was part of this iteration of Museum Without Walls. We are a huge team, and it was a perfect and fantastic round. And please do visit the exhibition. Tell us what you think via email, social media, or fill out the form on the exhibition website. We can only really improve with your support and your comments. And we've, I think, dropped the link to the exhibition. It's now online. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's an research and development project on the other end. So we'll have flaws, but we will build on it. And please do let us know if you find any mistakes within the coding, etc. So this digital is not that easy. Even this event today, I had to relog in 3 times. We're learning from each other, and we're learning from you, most especially our audience. Thank you, and follow us on social media to learn more about the exhibition and the projects that we're doing in Turkey, not only in the arts, but in education and English as well. And hope to meet you again soon, and face to face, hopefully.
Yeah.